Our last speaker of the day is Michael Sherlock. He's an author and founder of Human Rights for Atheists, Agnostics, and Secularists. 我们最后一个讲职，今天最后一个讲职是 Michael Sherlock。他现在住日本，可是他是澳洲人啊，欢迎他。
Okay, can you hear me all right? Yes. Is it too quiet? I'm very quiet. I'm an author, I'm not really a speaker, although this year I've started attending more conferences and pushing my comfort zone. Yeah, so forgive me if I just stick to my notes because I like words, not so much people. That's not true, I'm a humanist. Anyway, firstly I'd like to thank Wayne Cardell and the International Humanist and Ethical Union, and more specifically the International Humanist Ethical Youth Organisation, for inviting me to come here and speak at this important event. Also, it would be remiss and rude of me not to thank our host, the National Taiwan University, so I sincerely thank you. I'm sure many, if not most of you, have no idea who I am, so please allow me just to briefly introduce myself. I am the Antichrist. That's just a joke. Although you can judge for yourself at the end of this speech, I'm sure some of you may actually think that at the end of this speech. I'm rather an offensive author. Not just for my own pleasure, but because I think there's a great value in being an offensive speaker and an offensive author. Anyway, so I guess I am, for lack of a better description, a militant atheist author. I've published 6 books on religion and atheism, various essays, and I'm nearing the end of my master's degree in religion at the University of New England. And some of you are probably wondering what a militant atheist is doing studying religion at the academic level. And Sun Tzu would answer you, know your enemy. So that's what I'm doing. There is a rhyme and reason to what I do. Here, I'll click this. I'm also the founder and chair of a very small human rights organisation, Human Rights for Atheists, Agnostics and Secularists. And we are petitioning the UN to pressure member states to repeal blasphemy and religious insult laws by strengthening freedom of expression within the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as by amending the UN Charter to expressly include non-believers as a protected group. We have a petition with over 15,000 signatures, and some of those signatures belong to Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Ricky Gervais, Roseanne Barr, Marion Maziere, as well as other well-known signatories from religious and non-religious organisations. Okay, so that is basically who I am and what I do. I'm also a husband and a father and a very good lasagna maker. My lasagna is probably the best, and I'm very humble, as you can tell. So, I'm going to spend the next 35 minutes. I'm going to spend the next 35 minutes presenting you with a case that may appear to be very strange at first glance. I'm going to argue, as the title of my speech suggests, that militant atheism, it's not up now, I can go back. Can I? Yes, that militant atheism is necessary for humanism and human progress. Okay, so I guess the most important thing for this speech is to first clearly define what we're talking about when we say atheism. Next, we need to talk about what militant atheism is not. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you have an understanding or a preconceived notion when I say militant atheism. I know there's one face that pops in your head, almost surely I know this. Also, I'll need to define what militant atheism is. And then at the end I'll go on to make my case that militant atheism is necessary for both humanism and human progress. But I'll deal with these issues in the reverse order, just to keep you entertained. You're welcome. Okay, so we just click it. Technology. That was a transition screen. Okay, atheism. Atheism can be broadly defined in 2 ways. Firstly, as a positive belief that there are no gods. And secondly, in the negative form, as a lack of belief in gods. I fall into the second category. Some people call us agnostic atheists. I don't believe agnostics exist. I'm joking. I'm not that fundamentalist. Okay, this is basically what positive atheism asserts. God doesn't exist. I personally believe we don't have sufficient evidence to make that claim. That is a positive claim. That's just me. This is me. I'm not an atheist because I pretend to know there is no God. I'm an atheist because I refuse to pretend to know there is one. That's how I am. I lean towards positive atheism in things I say on social media because I think positive atheism is valuable for just a little shock value and shaking people up. I can stand there and say, there's probably not a God. I'd honestly say there's probably not a God. Sometimes I'll tell people, look, there's no God, there's no Thor, there's no pixies in the end of the garden. Let's just grow up. But yeah, that's only for shock value. My actual internal, I think, thinking process is closer to this. All right, so I'm caning through it pretty fast, I think. Am I? Yeah, okay. Whichever way you slice it, atheism is simply a lack of God belief. It's an absence of God belief. That's all atheism is. And I think that's about as much time as I need to spend defining atheism to a room probably brimming with atheists. Can you put your hand up if you're an atheist? Okay, so let's move on. Alright. What militant atheism is not. Militant atheism is not the sycophantic statism and near superstitious messianism of Stalin's Russia. It is neither Mao's dictatorship nor his ill-contrived Great Leap Forward, which many scholars argue caused the Great Chinese Famine. It is not Pol Pot's Communist Khmer Rouge, and it certainly is not Hitler's Nazism. Militant atheism is not the atrocities committed by fascist and communist dictators, who happen to have been both atheists and a-leprechaunistes. Militant atheism is none of these things, despite what the vain, desperate, deceptive ramblings of enraptured religious apologists would have you believe. Now, before I explain what militant atheism is, let me just take a brief moment to address the atheist atrocities fallacy, because it is so prevalent within religious apologetics and on social media that I think it does deserve some attention here. So, the atheist atrocities fallacy. This is very common. You've probably come across it. Okay. Stalin is the religious apologist's favourite character to trot out in an attempt to demonstrate that atheism is dangerous. Most frequently, the religious person will raise characters like Stalin, Pol Pot, and Mao to rebut or at least mitigate justified charges of religious violence. That is when the atheist accuses the religious person saying, look, your religion has violent consequences, or can frequently have violent consequences, and they'll turn around and say, what about Stalin? Or Mao, or Pol Pot. And this is the atheist atrocities fallacy. It is a multifaceted and multidimensional monster of a fallacy, comprised of misrepresented historical data, combined with a cocktail of illogically contrived arguments. It is at its core a tu quoque fallacy, or U2 fallacy, employed to deflect justified charges of religious violence by erroneously charging atheism with similar, if not worse, conduct. But it is much more than this. For within its tangled and mangled edifice can be found the false analogy fallacy, the poisoning of the well fallacy, the false cause fallacy, and even an implied slippery slope fallacy. If you'd like to read more about this, you can just Google atheist atrocities fallacy, or go to the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science, and you'll find it there, along with a few other essays and articles I've written for the Dawkins Foundation. But the point here is that militant atheism is neither a euphemism for totalitarianism and or fascism. It is not dictators like Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, and Mao. So then, what is militant atheism? I think comedian Ricky Gervais describes it the most eloquently. I'm a militant fundamentalist atheist. I'm going to get on a crowded train, unbutton my coat and say rational things. People will be hurt. I think that's probably the best description of a militant atheist. Today, anyway. The term militant atheism, I'll just click there and get distracted by the beautiful face. The term militant atheism possibly finds its roots in the name of a nominally independent anti-religious organization in Stalin's Russia called the League of the Militant Atheists, or literally translated, the League of the Militant Godless. This organization was primarily concerned with intellectually dismantling religion with publications and by engaging in debates with believers. However, in 1929, the group took a violent turn when at the Second Congress of Atheists, the editor of Pravda, Nikolai Bukharin, called for the extermination of religion at the tip of the bayonet. And his violent, inhumane suggestion was enthusiastically endorsed by the newly elected leader of the group, Yaroslavsky. Here is where humanism would have greatly benefited the victims of this early group of Stalinist atheists. For had they placed the sanctity of human life over the perceived sanctity of human beliefs, they would have remained a purely intellectual movement, as militant atheism is today. So then, the relationship between outspoken militant atheism and humanism is not only essential, but codependent, as I'll reiterate at the end of this speech as well. The term militant atheism is used today as a pejorative label describing atheists who actively, yet peacefully, highlight the harms associated with religious superstition and dogma. And if you are possessed by the mistaken belief that religion doesn't cause harm, all I can say is read more. Thumb through the blood-soaked and misogynistic annals of religious history, from Islamic to Jewish to Christian to Hindu, and even, dare I say it here, Buddhist. Although I do concede that Buddhism is comparatively more peaceful religion than its insane Abrahamic counterparts. But let's not ignore the slavery and tyranny of certain Buddhist regimes that have existed and in Myanmar, for example, continue to exist. To further justify the belief that religion does cause harm, read the modern studies that show how children raised in religious households are, generally speaking, less intelligent, have a harder time distinguishing between fact and fiction, are more judgmental and selfish than children raised in non-religious households, and who, if raised with a belief in an angry and vengeful God, are more likely to develop severe personality disorders. Now, the militant atheist smear, and let's be honest, in its modern employment, it is nothing but a smear and a slander. Is used as a kind of implied slippery slope fallacy in an attempt to argue that outspoken atheism will necessarily lead to Stalin's Russia, which, I hope you'll agree, is not only unfounded and illogical, but patently absurd. Because you know what atheism is, right? I defined it, so, okay, good. Christian apologists, Lyons and Butt, in an article on militant atheism, have the following to say about scientists who unapologetically express disbelief in gods. This is what they say. In fact, a large majority of scientists now believe that God does not exist. Here they misrepresent scientists like Dawkins and Krauss, who aren't positive atheists, as I described earlier. But anyway, what would religious apologetics be without a handful of straw men? These scientists, Lyons and Butt continue, feel that they should militantly spread their idea of atheism and evolution as far and as wide as possible. I'm not sure what you've heard, but I've yet to hear Dawkins, Harris, Tyson or Krauss call for the beheading of believers in order to further an atheistic and scientific worldview. But perhaps that's because I've been in Japan, still. Yes. Where am I? Oh yes, Dawkins has responded to this false accusation of being a militant extremist atheist in true Dawkinsian fashion. In the following words: yes, I'm just as bad as any fundamentalist extremist. Excuse me while I throw acid in a girl's face and cut off someone's head with a machete. So, I think he made his point quite well there. In his article in the New Yorker entitled "All Scientists Should Be Militant Atheists," Dr. Lawrence Krauss wrote, "Sometimes I refer to the fact that religion and science are often in conflict. From time to time, I ridicule religious dogma. When I do, sometimes I get accused in public of being a militant atheist. Even a surprising number of my colleagues politely ask if it wouldn't be better to avoid alienating religious people. Shouldn't we respect religious sensibilities, mastering potential conflicts and building common ground with religious groups so as to create a better, more equitable world? Dr. Krauss continues, in science, of course, the very word sacred is profane. No ideas, religious or otherwise, get a free pass. The notion that some idea or concept is beyond question or attack is anathema to the entire scientific undertaking. This commitment to open questioning is deeply tied to the fact that science is an atheistic enterprise. Okay. And here we arrive at the first of my two central points. Militant atheism is necessary for human progress. Remember, I reversed it for your entertainment. You're welcome. Okay, militant atheism, that is the outspoken criticism of religion and religious dogmas, is necessary for human progress. George Bernard Shaw enunciated this point when he penned upon the lips of one of his characters the following remark: all great truths begin as blasphemies. Now, we need not confine ourselves to the attacking of religious dogmas alone, because the unapologetic criticism of dogmas, whether religious or otherwise, represents the core spirit of militant atheism. So I'll just give you a few examples that demonstrate beyond any reasonable doubt that militant atheism, or at least the spirit and driving ethos behind militant atheism, has sown the seeds and tended the blossoming fields of human progress. The heliocentric solar system. Copernicus, Galileo, and Giordano Bruno were all viewed as horrible blasphemers for having the audacity to correctly suggest, in accordance with reality as we now understand it to be, that we in fact live in a heliocentric solar system. Martin Luther, the founder of Protestant Christianity, referred to Copernicus as simply a clown who was out to refute scripture. Galileo was placed under house arrest by the church, and Giordano Bruno was burned to the stake. But here I'd like to debunk a myth that was perhaps unwittingly propagated by Neil deGrasse Tyson in his television series Cosmos. I researched Giordano Bruno's execution for my second book by examining the primary historical sources available, and although his advocacy of the heliocentric model of our solar system was included amongst his blasphemies, it certainly wasn't his most provocative. He had some pretty choice words to say about the Pope, or triumphant beast, as Bruno called him, as well as Jesus, whom Bruno described as merely a deceptive magician. And one Catholic historian at his death tells us that these were the main reasons for his barbaric execution, not so much his advocacy of the heliocentric solar system, although I repeat, it was included. However, I digress. The discovery of the heliocentric solar system wasn't only significant for its positive impact upon our understanding of the cosmos, which has fomented a whole host of advances in technology and understanding in relation to cosmology and astrophysics, but it also acted as one of the first dominoes that knocked over our species' previously worshipped faith-based approach to the acquisition of knowledge, which caused the scientific revolution, which in turn gave real breathing space for humanism and rationalism to grow and flourish in many societies to benefit all those lucky enough to be raised therein. Next example, geology. The science of geology also caused tempestuous waves amongst the majority by discovering and unapologetically announcing that the Earth was in fact much older than James Ussher's Christian chronology permitted, which held that the Earth was only 6,000 years old, a belief now only held by nascent fundamentalists and similar kooks and crackpots. Dawkins describes the era of young Earth creationists in the following words. He's an endless source of witty smashes. People who believe that the Earth was created 6,000 years ago when it's actually 4.5 billion years old should also believe the width of North America is 8 yards. That is the scale of the error. I think that really highlights it quite well. Guess what the next example is? Yes, evolution. Darwin's theory of evolution, which is still highly controversial in overtly religious countries, yes, including the USA. due to the fact that it blasphemously and unrepentantly conflicts with the dogmatic religious ignorance that kept our ancestors in the dark on many important scientific and historical questions by explaining not only the origin and development of our species and others, an explanation that flies in the face of religious nonsense that tries to answer those questions, but it has also become the sturdy backbone of highly valuable sciences such as biology and archaeology, for example. Yet regardless of the mountains of evidence in its favour and its obvious benefit to the advancement of human knowledge and subsequently human progress, the theory of evolution, now let's be honest, the fact of evolution, is still irrationally rejected and denied by many religious people for no other reason than it provides a reason to reject their ancient fables. Now, guess what the next example will be? Militant atheism is necessary for human progress. Vaccines. Yes, still controversial in many dogmatically ignorant circles, and some have even tried to take us back to the days of now avoidable epidemics and widespread polio by erroneously asserting that vaccines cause autism. I'm particularly fond of this comic strip, I love this. A study linking autism to childhood vaccinations has not only been debunked, but it is an elaborate fraud. We trust that this ends the matter. It doesn't end the matter at all. It makes them more outraged. Okay, these are the kinds of lengths that devout believers will go to keep themselves and the rest of us caged within the beguiling boughs of gloomy ignorance and mindless dogmatism and faith, despite the obvious advantages that occasion the destroying of the old to make way for the new. Just to give you a real-world and up-to-date example of this struggle between willful ignorance and the intelligent desire to progress with the findings of science, I give you this man. Healthy young child goes to doctor, gets pumped with a massive shot of many vaccines, doesn't feel good and changes autism. Many such cases, 0 cases. That's all. Oh yeah, and here is Hillary Clinton's position on the matter. The science is clear, the earth is round, the sky is blue and vaccines work. Okay. No, I'm not an advocate for Hillary or Donald, because I'm not an American. But let's just face it, she has a more intelligent position on the matter. Next example. Climate change. The discovery that climate change is the result of human ignorance, yes, I say human ignorance, because if we had have known what we were doing when we began to undertake our grand adventure that not only threatens us all with extinction, we might have done things a little differently. If not, we'd be back at ignorance again. So either way, climate change is the result of human ignorance. Yet people still vigorously attempt to refute this scientific fact. Yes, the acknowledgement of human-made climate change may hurt your pocket and your feelings, but facts care for neither of these things. They exist regardless of your financial and or emotional comfort, and climate change is a fact. The understanding that we are causing this planet to grow sick is, for obvious reasons, of great significance to human progress, because without a planet, you can't have humans, and without humans, well, human progress may be a little difficult to achieve, I'm afraid. To give you another real-world and up-to-date example of the human ignorance surrounding this subject, I'll give you once again Mr. Donald Trump. The concept of global warming was created by the Chinese in order to make US manufacturing non-competitive. He's wonderful, isn't he?
That's why you're following him.
Okay. Next example, and here I will be reiterating a little talk on the origins of humanism and Western humanism. We talked about Western and Eastern humanism. I love this quote by Thomas Paine. The world is my country, all mankind are my brethren, and to do good is my religion. I dub him the greatest father of humanism, but that's because I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Thomas Paine. And also because I'm studying a master's degree in religion, and I was lucky enough to get a historian to coach me through doing a historical essay on Thomas Paine, and it was fantastic. I loved the experience. I felt like I was there. And fun fact about Thomas Paine, he was never sober, pretty much. Hitchens refutes that, but I wish Hitchens was still here, so I could read it. I mean, I have the primary sources. But anyway. Thomas Paine and the Enlightenment. It is also a matter of fact that the seeds of modern democracy, I say modern democracy, and human rights were sown in the Enlightenment by proponents like Thomas Paine, whose opinion on the tyranny of religion and the aristocracy was so controversial for his time that he was given the death sentence in absentia for seditious libel against the crown. And even those who had been his ardent supporters, such as Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, eventually criticised him for his blasphemies. Blasphemies that helped to create a wall between religion and politics in Western democracies, thereby placing the rights of human beings above human beliefs, which is very important and the theme of my organisation. Human beings above human beliefs. I can't stress that enough. How far away do we go? Time is running away. Okay, so I say that Thomas Paine is the father of Western humanism, and I say Western humanism because if we trace the philosophical roots of Western humanism back, we are forced to traverse through ancient Greece, classical Greece, back through ancient Asia and Asia Minor. So when I say Western humanism, I'm talking about from the Enlightenment. And Thomas Paine, as I said, is number one in that game, my opinion. So to conclude this point, militant atheism is necessary for human progress, because without those who fear not the condemnation and persecution that accompanies the unashamed criticism of religious and religiously held dogmas and superstitions, progress is ruthlessly slain and made the victim of mindlessly worshipped dogmas and beliefs. And this creates a situation in which humanity, despite its best interests, repeats its long-held and cherished insanities over and over and over and over and over and well, you probably get the picture. I think the best way to sum up this point is with the following words. The more we dogmatically believe, the less we learn. And the less we learn, the slower we advance. Conversely, the less we dogmatically believe, the more we learn. And the more we learn, the quicker we progress. Okay, now on to my final point. You've been very patient. Thank you. Militant atheism is necessary for humanism. I thought I'd save this for last because it's what you were waiting for, right? When I use the word humanism, I do so with some reasonable and justifiable conflation. Please allow me to explain. When I say that militant atheism is necessary for humanism, I'm saying that it is necessary for both humanism, as its strict definition is concerned, and also for human rights, which I see as one of its grandest products, its noblest products. So when I argue militant atheism is necessary for humanism, I'm really arguing that it is necessary for both humanism and human rights. So strictly speaking, the title of my speech should have been Militant Atheism is Necessary for Humanism, Human Rights, and Human Progress. However, I didn't want to have too many humans in the title of my speech because we all know what happens when you put too many humans in one place. Conflict. And I didn't want my speech tearing itself apart before I had a chance to deliver it. Now, how would one go about arguing that outspoken militant atheism is necessary for humanism in its strictest sense? Well, one would only need to ask the question, what is the antithesis of humanism? I think you'll agree it is dogma and superstition. And what is the primary source of those two thought-destroying demons? It is religion. Sorry, but that's a fact. So how does this brand of atheism, a firebrand of atheism, combat religion? It does so by refusing to pay enabling lip service to an institution that the majority still believe should be shielded from rational and justified criticism and attacks. This refusal on the militant atheists' part naturally causes them, us, to be reviled by the majority. Voltaire once quipped, "It is difficult to free fools from the chains they revere." And I think that's quite apt. In my opinion, the value of the militant atheist cannot be overstated. Militant atheists are not merely concerned with criticising religion for the fun of it. Well, not all militant atheists. We serve an important purpose, a valuable function, and that is to fight against the tsunami of religious bigotry, misogyny, homophobia, hatred, and violence by stripping the automatic, unthinking, and undeserved reverence the majority of human beings still pay to this archaic institution of human society. Further, the militant atheist is the frontline blocker for the scientist and the human rights activist, not to mention the downtrodden victim of religious barbarism. The militant atheist's job is to clear a path so that love, logic, and reason may walk unmolested by molested minds who seek perpetually to resurrect and resuscitate the insanities, cruelties, and credulities of a dark and deranged superstitious past. Militant atheists employ combative psychological strategies so that we might one day be freed from the tyranny that is religion. And we, well, speaking for myself, I, do all of this with our children in mind. Because if we truly wish to leave a prosperous and bloodless harvest for our children, we must suffer in their stead, so that when they inherit this insane world from us, it may well be a little bit saner. It will, if we succeed in our intellectual endeavour, be a world in which human rights are placed over human beliefs. But here I should offer a qualification, and this will be touching on Michael Sherlock's earlier point. I do not see religion as the only problem we face. It is one of them, the one I've chosen to combat. Nor is religion completely devoid of value. Great art and architecture have been created from religious inspiration, as well as many beautiful and noble philosophies. Love thy neighbour as thyself, the golden rule, the good Samaritan. Here I'm very Western-centric, you'll notice. Forgive me. The problem with religion, however, is that it is laced and poisoned by dogmas and superstitions that are murderous, xenophobic, homophobic, suicidal, misogynistic, and stupefyingly ignorant. And so I guess it may be accurate to describe religion, that is, the institution as a whole package, as being either arsenic laced with vitamin C, or vitamin C laced with arsenic. Whichever way you slice it, death and destruction is usually the result, and the annals of history and observing current affairs will certainly attest to that fact. And here we arrive at the beauty of humanism. The beauty of humanism is that we as humanists can dissect religious teachings and adopt that which is rational, reasonable, and beneficial for humanity. We as humanists can love our neighbour without psychologically abusing our children, or oppressing our daughters, or separating ourselves from our fellow human beings on irrationally divisive grounds. We can take that which is truly humanistic from religious scripture and doctrine and discard the rest of the rubbish. But in order for us to build a global humanistic society that is rational and compassionate, we must first pull up the toxic weeds of our dark and depraved religious past. Here is where the militant atheist does the highest service to humanity. We are willing to suffer the slings and arrows so that poisonous impediments to humanism can be neutralized. I think this point was brilliantly made by Anna Hirsi-Ali, who said, "Only through rigorous scrutiny can cultures progress, and only through free speech can rigorous scrutiny occur." For the purpose of this speech, we might say that only through rigorous scrutiny can human society progress towards humanism, and only through free speech and militant atheism can rigorous scrutiny occur. For my final point, I'll argue that militant atheism is necessary for human rights, which will bring me full circle back to the start of my talk today. Do I have time to get back to the start of my talk today? Who knows? Okay. It's going to be tough. Okay, here we go. Okay. As I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, I'm the founder of a small human rights organisation, Human Rights for Atheists, Agnostics and Secularists. We are petitioning the UN to pressure member states to repeal and abolish blasphemy and religious insult laws. Now, in recent years, those types of laws there's been a resurgence of that type of law, particularly in the Muslim world and in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Jordan, even in Western democracies and Asian democracies, we're seeing a rise of these blasphemy and religious insult laws come back. And I think Dr. David Nash, historian Dr. David Nash, made a good point on blasphemy laws. He said, blasphemy, the attacking, wounding and damaging of religious religious belief has in so short a space of time suddenly returned to become an extremely combustible part of modern life. And I just got a message today from one of my followers who said, guess what? Australia now has a blasphemy law. As of this week, our parliament passed a religious, well, it's called religious vilification. But vilification includes criticising, ridiculing, and disparaging religion, and it now covers social media. So if we post in social media, I'm not going back to Australia, I'm staying in Japan. But if my friends in Australia, my atheist friends in Australia post something wrong, they can be fined, I think, up to $7,500, and it can go on your criminal record. Passed by Parliament this week, fresh off the press. Horrible news. Okay. I had a whole bunch of other yada 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 to say, but I don't have time. So, in all of this religious madness, more voices of unapologetic reason are necessary. And these voices, I argue, are the voices of militant atheists. Because what is religion at the end of the day? Many of my fellow militant atheists say that our religion is just stupid. However, I couldn't disagree more. Religion isn't stupid, it's genius. Think about it. What scam in the history of scams has enjoyed even a tenth of the success that religion has enjoyed? It has amassed in the trillions from the sale of tickets to a non-existent place. It has profited immeasurably by selling a cure for a disease that does not exist. And it has achieved boundless wealth and authority by convincing its gullible marks that only it can garner the favour of an imaginary wizard in the sky, who it alleges is the only character with sufficient power to defeat the terrifying boogeyman, who also happens to be the creative designer of this amazingly brilliant scam. Religion can kill in the millions, and not only will people not object and rebel against such cruel criminality, they will turn to it in the hopes of finding an end to the violence it has caused. Religion is without a doubt one of the most brilliant scams in the history of scams. And the cherry on this scam is that it is free and tax-free to kill and exploit whilst avoiding legal consequences for its criminal conduct. One of the secrets to the success of this scam, I think, is that it turns families into subsidiary cults, so that its targets become the unwitting perpetrators of the scam that they were scammed into buying before their minds had a chance to reject the obvious absurdities that have in no way hindered its success. So religion isn't stupid, it's genius. And it is its genius that has turned it into a social institution beyond criticism. But the time has come for more militant atheists to unapologetically criticize this cherished institution. However, in so doing, we must be careful not to let our anti-theism turn into anti-humanism, as the atheists under Stalin did. And so I'll just quickly conclude by saying this. No, I won't say that. I'll do that for quite a while. I'll say this. Militant atheism is necessary for humanism and human progress, and humanism is necessary for militant atheism. And thank you for listening. Sorry I had to fly through it. Finished.
And we are sorry that we can't give you more time.
No problem.
Very good.
No problem.
All right, guys. Sorry, let's give one more big round of applause.